Hello everyone, welcome to or welcome back to my channel. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Lena and I make college and book related content here on YouTube, and today will be my June wrap up. In the month of June, I read 5 different books. It's also Pride Month, so I tried to read a lot of books that featured either authors who are part of the LGBTQ community or characters or main themes that were part of that. I didn't exclusively read books in that category, but I tried to push myself and read more, and also try to do more research so I could add more books to my TBR. If I didn't have access to them in my library, at least they'd be in my list, so when I came across them in the future, I'd be able to do that. And I actually found some really great reads that I would definitely recommend in this video. The first book that I read in the month of June was King and the Dragonflies by Kacen Callender. This book is a middle grade novel, and it follows King, whose brother has unexpectedly and tragically died, and he's dealing with the grief of his brothers being dead, and he's trying to grapple with that, and he believes that his brother has come back in the form of a dragonfly, so he's always looking for dragonflies. He's looking for one specific dragonfly that he saw at his brother's funeral because he believes that it is his brother. He is obviously really struggling with this, and he wants nothing more than to talk with his friend Sandy. However, just before his brother died, he told Sandy he never wanted to talk to him again because his brother told him not to hang out with Sandy because Sandy is gay. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. I've been wanting to read a book by Kacen Callender for some time now, and I'm really glad that I did. I thought the cover of this book was stunning, first and foremost, like truly beautiful, but I also just thought the characters were beautiful. I loved King and his voice in this book, his raw honesty with his thoughts, his experiences with grief, with sexuality, with growing up, with his family, with his friends. So many complicated issues that so many kids deal with, and yet we act like they're not capable of that when it's very clearly that they are capable and that they have to deal with things like this. It's part of growing up. I also thought there were great themes that were tackled in this book. This book really packs a punch. We talk about grief, we talk about sexuality, about your family, friendship, racism, homophobia, the intersectionality between race and sexuality in the Black community, and kind of the taboo subject of sexuality. I also just really loved King's aunt as a character. I thought she was incredible. I thought she had some great lines, and I just really liked her as a person. But overall, I really enjoyed this book, and I would definitely recommend it if you're looking for any kind of book that talks about this. Kacen Callender said they wanted to write this book because they felt like they didn't read any books with young, gay, Black boys, and this is one of those. The next book that I read in the month of June was Anger is a Gift by Mark Oshiro. This book is about Moss, who is a young high school student living in Oakland, I believe, and he is the son of a man who was murdered by the police in a brutal incident. And so he's been dealing a lot with this fame ever since then, but he just doesn't want to deal with that. He doesn't want to be a part of that. He doesn't want to be the face of a movement. He just wants to keep his head down and just keep going through life with his friends at his high school. But unfortunately, that's not an option for him. His school is introducing increasingly more and more aggressive tactics towards the students, including security guards, metal detectors, and it just continues to escalate and continues to get out of control. Moss basically has to decide if he's willing to keep his head down and just not be a part of it, or if he wants to stand up for something. I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars. I was really interested by the premise of this book, and I think that this book contains a lot of important themes, including subjects on police brutality, on what it means to be going to a public school that is significantly poorer and has way less resources than the school the next block over. It talks about school and social inequality. It talks about race and racism, and it also talks about sexuality and homophobia and those kinds of things as well. I just thought that the execution of this book was not great. This book, in the author's note, I believe it says that it started out as like a sci-fi or like fantasy novel, and then it quickly changed into realistic fiction. But it read like there were too many aspects of like the fantasy element were left in there. I just thought that the characters and the relationships between characters was not great. They weren't very realistic. It felt very contrived. The relationships between parents and children, or just adults and teens, was not great. It didn't feel real. It felt very fake. It felt like someone who didn't know what teens were like was writing about teens. I also think that this book kind of didn't do a wonderful job with the actual execution of talking about police brutality. This is a horrible issue in our country. Like, it impacts so many families and people every single day, and it will impact them for the rest of their life, for generations to come. But it just wasn't done well in this book, in the sense of like, it seemed to be sensationalized. It seemed to be like trying to make it like this big drama moment instead of like showing the horror of it all. It was kind of glamorizing it in some ways, is kind of how it read to me. And to go off of that, I just think that the character of Esperanza was like totally mistreated in so many ways. The sexism that was present in this book was not great. Like, it was really not great. And I just think that that was kind of harmful to the overall point of the book. I also read some reviews about the ableism present in this book, and I'm not as well educated on that. That was one of my goals for this year. But I did see like what they were talking about with the characters that were in a wheelchair and things like that. I did find that a little problematic as well. So I just think this book had too many issues for what it was trying to accomplish, and that the issues kind of overshadowed the themes. The third book that I read in the month of June was The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. I read this book because Pride Month, but also because I'm just trying to get and read more classics as I can. I'm an English literature major, so obviously always trying to work towards that. And I saw this book. It's a quick read. I have been wanting to read Oscar Wilde for some time now, and I just haven't gotten around to it. And I didn't like it. I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars. Honestly, I would have given it less than that, but I know me personally, I was reading it more harshly than I should have, because I'm someone who cannot read satire. Like, I genuinely cannot read satire. I get frustrated, I get annoyed, I get so worked up, and then all of a sudden I realize it's satire. And usually someone else has to tell me it's satire for me to realize it's satire. So in this case, I was reading reviews on Goodreads, and I was like, oh, it's satire. I get it now. But like, it's just so frustrating to me and hard for me to enjoy that. And I also just like don't like that genre. So that, I'm trying not to let that weigh against the book. So that's why I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. I do think it had some amazing queer themes. A queer reading of that book would be great. Oscar Wilde obviously was very well known for this. And I think that it was really fascinating to consider what time period this book was written and how blatantly gay it was. Like, I kind of loved that. I also just like struggled a lot with reading the book. I thought it was really heavy-handed. I was not invested in the plot or the characters. I just got really frustrated with a lot of aspects of the book. The anti-Semitism and racism were also just out of control. So a lot of things that I didn't like about the book. I do think Oscar Wilde was really talented. I have enjoyed seeing his plays. I saw The Importance of Being Earnest and absolutely loved it, but I just didn't like this book. Fourth book that I read in the month of June was The Justice of Kings by Richard Swan. Within this large empire that is largely inspired by the medieval period, Sir Conrad von Valt is the emperor's justice. That means he travels all across the empire trying to make sure that the laws are being followed and really taking extra steps to hold trials or making sure the correct punishments are doled out and justice is served. So that is basically his job. And his right-hand woman, Helena, kind of his scribe. She documents a lot of the work. She's being trained under him as his apprentice in many ways. And then he also has Bressinger, who is his other right-hand guy, who does a lot of the work as well and is older than Helena, so he knows a lot more. Things are definitely afoot here. There's problems, there's more uprisings, there's more threats to the Emperor's Justice's power. And Sir Conrad von Valt has to deal with this and kind of figure out how he's going to grapple with a justice and what's being thrown in his face. I gave this book 4.5 out of 5 stars. I could die for medieval fantasy books. Like, that is my jam, that is my thing. I love those books. I will always try to read them. I just think they like speak to me. Like, I don't know what it is about the medieval period, but medieval fantasy, just like, I love it. I adore it. It's everything to me. So that's obviously why I enjoyed this book a lot, but I also thought the characters were great. I thought it was really interesting to have Helena be the narrator for this story, even though the premise of the book kind of makes it sound like it's going to be Sir Conrad, who is the main character, and he definitely is like the main character, but Helen is the one telling the story, so we're in her head seeing everyone else around her, and I thought her voice was really interesting. It's told in the same like confessional style as The Sympathizer was, that I read in the month of May, but I liked this one a little bit better because I found it to be not so redundant and circular, so I enjoyed that more. Instead, there were just little hints here and there of like, this is Helena in the future, things went way worse after that kind of thing. Characters in general were just great. I really thought that Sir Conrad was interesting. I thought Bressinger was interesting. I liked Helena a lot. And I thought she was a really great character in the sense that she was flawed and she was willing to own up to those flaws, but also give her space for that and say that it was completely okay that she was like this at a certain time in her life, which I thought was really refreshing. I obviously loved the theme of justice. I mean, the title kind of gives it away and the characters kind of give it away, but I really liked all the trials and the investigations and kind of like the mystery aspect of it. I thought it was very fascinating and also well done. So I really enjoyed that as well. My greatest issues with the book, and the reason why I'm not giving it 5 stars, is I found there was a few areas about race and or skin color that I found questionable, and I don't want to say problematic because I honestly wasn't sure how to read them, but like it's kind of suggested that the characters are white, the main characters are, and there's like a really odd passage about skin color and race, and I just like, that did not sit right with me, and then they never brought it up again, so like why did you bring it up? Like that just was not the vibe. And I also just thought it was a little interesting that like it was Helena's story, but it was also like Sir Conrad's story, and I think that it was a very like male dominated world, and I just at times wondered about like, you know, being a woman and that kind of thing, because Helena also like was talked down a lot too, and it just made me think about how like for so long fantasy books were dominated by men. It wasn't necessarily like something I hated about the book, but it did make me think after I was done reading it. The last book that I read in the month of June was Last Night at the Telegraph Club by Melinda Lowe, and this book popped up randomly when I was doing research for new books that featured, you know, pride or LGBTQ plus themes, characters, authors, etc. And this book has won so many different awards since it came out. Like honestly, this book has been getting a lot of rave reviews, and so I was instantly intrigued and wanted to read it, so I was so glad I got to read it this month. The book takes place in the 1950s in San Francisco, I believe. Lily is a 17-year-old. She lives in Chinatown. She's a Chinese American. She lives with her family, and she one day saw a book with 2 women who had fallen in love, and this idea of 2 women falling in love absolutely fascinates her and continues to circulate around in her head. So she's dealing with a lot of those ideas and thoughts. At the same time, there's the Red Scare, and communism is very much a threat, so a lot of Chinese Americans are under increased surveillance by the FBI and things like that. Lily also is starting to get closer with a new friend named Kathleen, and they're starting to really hang out more, and then they end up going to the Telegraph Club, and suddenly everything becomes clear to Lily, and she really starts to fall in love with Kat. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. It was a beautiful love story, like truly astounding. I thought the discussions on sexuality and love and being young, being a teen, were just so powerful and strong. I thought that this did such a great job of giving space to think about one's sexuality, explore one's sexuality, and really just celebrate it at the end of the day. I think that it also addressed so many great things. I really liked that because it took place in the 1950s, there's a lot of information about communism and the Red Scare, and kind of on the heels of the incarceration camps that Japanese Americans were placed in during World War II. So I thought that was really interesting, and I learned a lot in that regard. I also really just enjoyed all the descriptions of the food and the clothes and the different restaurants and places in Chinatown. I just got so much out of it, and I was kind of obsessed. Kath and Lily together were absolutely adorable, and I really just liked a lot of the relationships between characters. I thought they were really great. I thought there was a lot of nuance between the relationships, and I really enjoyed that. The reason why I'm not giving it 5 stars is for a couple reasons. This is a spoiler alert, but first, I don't think have sex in a classroom. Like, neither of them, I think, had really dated anyone previously or been physical with anyone previously, and they basically escalate and just have sex in the classroom. So that's a spoiler alert. Sorry about that. but I also just think a little frustrating that sometimes it seemed like it was info dumping about the 1950s, and like everything that happened in the 1950s was just like shoved into this book. So at times I was a little annoyed with that, but I did overall appreciate the research that went into this book. And the final thing that like I have kept saying that I'm not letting it go and impact my rating, but I feel like a little bit of it does, is I'm just really getting frustrated with like STEM and girls, and just how if you want to be like a smart girl, a cool girl, that girl, you have to be in STEM. And like that's it. Like if you're not valued, your interests aren't worth it, valued, valid. If you're into the humanities or you're into something more tech or something more like trade school related, it's just not the same. And like, who are you? What are you doing? And I just am starting to get really frustrated with that, because I just feels like any smart girl has to be in STEM. And I think that we're quickly moving into a toxic place in today's world, where if you're not going to college for something in STEM, what are you doing? And I'm just here to say, if everyone goes into STEM, 20 years down the line, we're really going to be regretting that. Having no one do literature, books, having no one do languages, no one do history, things like that, that actually will have damages on our society. So I'm just saying, it's not this book's fault, but it's another example of me being frustrated with that. But those are all the books that I read in the month of June. I'm hoping to read more books in the month of July. Hopefully I actually will be able to do that. But thank you so much for watching today's video. If you have any questions, book recommendations, video recommendations, feel free to leave them down in the comments below, and I will see you all next week.